At first, I thought I had misread it. My eyes aren't what they used to be, especially in the steam of the kitchen, where I was rolling pie crust with wet hair and lavender lotion still soft on my wrists. $117, it said. For a place I couldn't even pronounce. Somewhere with 2 accents in the name and a tiny flag I didn't recognize. A hotel. The bank's text had come in like a whisper, not a siren, declined. Suspicious activity. I set the phone down beside the flour tin. Thought, it's probably a mistake. I'd been baking an apple pie for Emma, her favorite, she says, though sometimes she just peels the crust off and leaves the filling behind. Still, something inside me cooled. Not the kind of fear that grabs you, but the other kind. The kind that sinks. That leaves a taste behind, metallic and slow. $117 isn't enough to break a person. Not on paper. But that's not what made my chest go tight. It was the feeling, the unmistakable sense that something had happened. That I'd been quietly moved to the other side of the glass. Left out. And I knew, with the sort of knowing that lives in your marrow, that it wasn't just a glitch. It was a sign. I didn't tell anyone about the alert. Not at first. I folded the text into my silence, like the way you fold scraps into a drawer you don't want to deal with yet. There was still pie to finish, and Emma would be coming by after her piano lesson. She never eats much, just pokes around the edges, asks for ice cream, and then disappears into her tablet while her mother talks over me at the table. The crust came out golden. I brushed it with a little milk, like I always do, then sat with my tea and the quiet hum of the oven cooling behind me. The house smelled like cinnamon and old grief. I live alone now. After Harold died, I stayed in this house because it was familiar, because my hands knew the cabinets by muscle memory, because I couldn't bear to leave the bedroom with his sides still undented. I live simply. I send birthday cards. I water the plants. I buy stamps in bulk and clip recipes I'll never try. The rhythms of my life are gentle. Predictable. Kind. When Rachel asked if she could be added to my card, I said yes. Just for shared bills, she'd said, in that breezy tone of hers, already typing my name into something before I could respond. I trusted her. She's my daughter. I raised her on coupons and canned beans. I stayed up sewing Halloween costumes until my fingers bled. When she cried into my shoulder after the divorce, I held her until my blouse was soaked through. Then came Michael. My son. He called one evening, voice thin and tired, asking if he could be added too. Only for emergencies, he said. In case something ever happens. I said yes before he finished the sentence. That's what family means, isn't it? Saying yes. Even when your hands tremble a little. They never asked for much. A grocery run here, a vet bill there. Once, I saw a charge for a late-night taxi and imagined Rachel walking home alone after work, heels clicking on wet pavement, and was glad she had a way out. I didn't think twice. But the week after that strange hotel charge, I logged in. I don't do that often. My passwords are all written on a yellowed index card tucked behind the phone book. I clicked through slowly, waiting for the site to load. The pie sat beside me, uneaten. The tea had gone tepid. And there it was. Mallorca. Barcelona. Boutique hotels. Spas with names that sounded like perfume. Designer shops I couldn't pronounce. Wine bars. Cab fares in euros. All of it stacked neatly on the screen like a betrayal made digital. My name was still at the top of the page, Margaret L. Colburn. But beneath it, under authorized users, were theirs. Rachel Colburn. Michael Colburn. No mistake. No glitch. They hadn't just used the card. They had lived on it. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. I just sat there, reading line after line, date after date. It stretched back weeks. Maybe months. While I was watering the rosemary and sending Emma little stickers in the mail, they had been traveling together. I clicked to see the dates. Barcelona during Thanksgiving. Mallorca the week of my birthday. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I stood, slowly, and walked to the sink. Washed my hands. I do that when I'm nervous. I stood there, wrists under cool water, watching suds swirl around my wedding band. It wasn't the money. That's the part people never understand. It's not the money. It's what it means. It meant they planned without me. Lived without me. Took what I gave in trust, and used it in silence. It meant they had memories, real ones, photos and meals and jokes told over wine, that I wasn't part of. That I hadn't even been allowed to know about. That's what it means when your card is used for something and no one tells you. You were not just forgotten. You were deliberately excluded. I didn't cry. That surprised me. There had been a time, years ago, when I might have sobbed over something like this. But instead, I felt still. Not calm, exactly. Just, emptied. Like someone had pulled the cord on a sink and everything inside me had drained away. I printed the statements one by one. Each page slid out of the machine with a low mechanical sound that felt louder than it should have in my quiet house. I stacked them neatly. Paper still matters to me. It's real in a way screens aren't. Screens can lie, can disappear. Paper stays. Then I opened Rachel's social media page. I don't check often. Too much noise, too many people smiling for cameras while the world burns just out of frame. But that day, I looked. Scrolled. And there they were. Her photos. Wine glasses, linen shirts, sunlight slipping through foreign windows. She was smiling in every frame. Michael was beside her in most of them. Laughing. Holding a glass. One caption read, "A much-needed break with the best company. #EarnEdit." Earned it. I stared at those two words for a long time. What had they earned? My retirement savings? My silence? There was one photo that stopped me cold. It was Rachel, standing in front of a fountain in what looked like some old European square, with a caption beneath it that read, "Living our story. Love this life. Our story." I sat back and let the phrase sink its claws in. It wasn't just the vacation. It was the rewriting. The quiet erasure of the person who made that life possible. Who paid bills in the dark and whispered bedtime stories and taught them how to tie their shoes. They had taken my money and written me out of the narrative entirely. But I didn't call. I didn't write a scolding email. I didn't send a single message. I just sat there, letting the hurt congeal into something more useful. Resolve. The next morning, I called the bank. A pleasant young man named Corey walked me through the process of freezing the cards and removing authorized users. I used that phrase more than once. "I'd like to remove these authorized users," I said, careful and slow. Effective immediately. He asked if there had been fraudulent activity. I told him, yes. Not in the legal sense. But in the moral one. He didn't press further. After that, I made another call, to an old friend of Harold's. A lawyer. He answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly and warm. "Margaret," he said. "It's been a long time. I need to update my will," I told him. "And I need it done this week." He didn't ask why. Just said, "I'll make time." I gathered everything. Statements. Screenshots. Even printed photos. Not to confront. Not yet. I wasn't after a fight. I was after clarity. That afternoon, I brewed a cup of tea and sat in the sunroom with my records spread around me like a quilt. The birds were tapping at the feeder, the light was gold and generous, and I realized something strange. I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. I had been asleep for years, lulled by the quiet rhythm of being needed just enough to be useful, but never enough to be included. I had mistaken dependence for connection. That day, I stopped mistaking. When they returned, Rachel and Michael, I didn't mention the frozen cards. I didn't ask how their trip went. I didn't even bring up the charges. I waited. Because I knew it would happen eventually. And it did. A week later, Rachel called. Her voice was high and tight. "Mom, my card isn't working. I was trying to get gas, and it got declined." I said nothing. "Did something happen with the account?" "Something did," I said. There was a pause on the line. Then her voice softened, slipping into the tone she used when she wanted something. When she was 9 and wanted to stay up late. When she was 17 and had dented the car. "Can we talk about this?" "We're talking now." Another pause. "I didn't think you'd notice." She didn't say sorry. She said, "I didn't think you'd notice." I heard everything in that. All the quiet assumptions that I was too old, too soft, too distant to pay attention. But I had been paying attention. I always had. I just hadn't wanted to believe what I saw. Until now. Michael called next. Unlike Rachel, he didn't bother with pleasantries. "Why did you cancel the cards?" His tone was clipped. Businesslike. "I didn't cancel them," I said evenly. "I removed you both." He was silent for a moment, processing that. "You can't just do that," he said finally. "We've built our monthly structure around shared billing. You agreed to that." "I agreed to help," I said. "Not to be stolen from." "Stolen? Are you serious?" He let out a dry, incredulous laugh. "It was a vacation, Mom. A once-in-a-lifetime thing. We've never asked for anything that big before." "You never asked," I corrected him. "You just used." Another silence. I imagined him standing in his small kitchen in Boston, running his hand through his hair the way he did when he was frustrated. "I used to kiss that head goodnight, back when he still fit into my lap." "It wasn't malicious," he said finally, softer now. "We thought you wouldn't notice. That it wouldn't matter." "And why wouldn't it matter?" "Because you never used the card," he said, and then caught himself. "I mean, you're comfortable. You don't travel. You're not going anywhere." "You're right," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." I hung up before he could respond. I sat in the kitchen, the evening light flattening across the floor like a tired old dog. Outside, someone was mowing a lawn. Inside, I was boiling. Not with rage. Not with the kind of anger that explodes and burns. This was the kind that simmers. That builds. I spent that evening quietly. Lit a candle. Watched the light dance against the glass. And then I pulled the photos from the trip again. Looked at them with a different eye. Not for smiles or backgrounds, but for details. In one photo, Rachel was wearing a necklace I hadn't seen before, a gold chain with a small red stone. I zoomed in. Ruby, maybe. Real or costume, I didn't know. But the clasp, yes. That clasp was mine. I'd given her that necklace 2 Christmases ago. She said it wasn't her style. I found it later in the back of a drawer, the box unopened. She wore it in Spain. In another photo, Michael stood holding a glass of wine, white shirt unbuttoned just slightly, sunglasses perched carelessly on his head. Behind him, blurred but unmistakable, was a woman I didn't know. Leaning into him. Laughing. They'd taken someone else. They hadn't just spent my money. They'd shared it, with others. With people who had no idea who I was, or what it meant to sacrifice half a life for the quiet hope that love would be returned without conditions. That night, I sat down with a yellow legal pad. The kind I used to keep in the drawer by the stove. The kind I used for grocery lists and measurements when Harold built the pantry shelves. On that pad, I wrote a list. Not of groceries. Of boundaries. No shared accounts. No emergency access. No financial entanglements. No passwords. No explanations. Below that, I started another list. Speak to bank about account protections. Call Harold's lawyer, update will. Document all prior charges. Request a fraud investigation. Prepare one formal letter for each child. I wasn't rushing. This wasn't revenge. It was recognition. For too long, I'd made myself small. Told myself that quiet was noble, that sacrifice was sacred, that being needed was the same as being loved. It isn't. Being used is not the same as being valued. The next morning, I called the bank again. Spoke to someone in the fraud department. I explained the charges. The locations. The unauthorized use. They opened a file. Took down details. Promised to follow up. Then I called Harold's lawyer. Asked him to draft a new will. Left nothing to interpretation. The house would go to Emma when she turned 35. Not before. The savings would be placed in trust, managed by someone outside the family. The rest? To causes I cared about. Libraries. Food banks. The garden fund at the retirement home where I volunteered twice a month. Nothing to Rachel. Nothing to Michael. I had given them my whole life. They returned it with a receipt. And now, I was closing the ledger. They found out on the return leg of a connecting flight out of Madrid. Rachel messaged first. Mom, did the bank freeze the card? We're stuck at the airport. They won't let us board until we settle the hotel bill. The message came in just after midnight. I was already awake. I don't sleep through the night anymore. Too many years of babies, then bills, then bladder shifts. I read it once, then turned the phone face down on the side table. 15 minutes later, Michael called. I didn't answer. The next message had more teeth. Mom. What did you do? This is serious. You've embarrassed us. The hotel staff is threatening to involve police. We can't pay without the card. Why would you do this? I made tea. Brought it out to the sunroom and sat with my slippers tucked under me. The first birds had just started stirring in the lilacs. The sky was pale and colorless. I watched the light arrive slowly, like someone tiptoeing back into a room they'd once loved. The phone buzzed again. Rachel, this is not okay. We need to talk. Then silence. By noon the next day, they were home. Or back in their homes, I should say. Not mine. No one came to the door. No one offered an apology or an explanation. Just a different kind of invasion this time, one of words. Voicemails. Emails. A flurry of messages thick with outrage and disbelief. You didn't have to go nuclear. You should have spoken to us first. Are you trying to ruin our credit? You've completely overreacted. I didn't respond. They weren't expecting that. Rachel always hated silence. She preferred chaos, noise, fights, messy confrontations. But quiet unnerved her. It made her wonder what had really changed. By the second day, the tone shifted. Less fire. More fog. Michael, Mom, we're sorry if it came across wrong. We didn't mean to hurt you. It was just a weird time. A hard year. We thought we deserved something good. Rachel, I thought you were fine with it. You've always helped us. Then came the guilt cards. The carefully composed letters, disguised as concern. Are you okay? We're worried about your mental state. Maybe you've been isolated too long. You've always been a bit sensitive, Mom. We just want to make sure you're not overthinking. I read them all once. Then folded them away. They didn't want to understand. They wanted me to resume the role. The donor. The dependable. The quiet pillar they could carve pieces from without asking. But I had stepped off the stage. And I wasn't going back. I went for walks. I baked things I didn't give away. I planted bluebells behind the house, where Harold used to mow too close to the fence line. And when the letters came from the bank, confirming the investigations, I filed them neatly. One morning, Rachel showed up. No warning. No Emma. I watched her through the window as she stood on the porch, arms folded, wearing the same scarf she had on in a photo from Milan. She knocked twice, light but insistent. I didn't move. She waited 10 minutes. Left. Later, there was a note in the mailbox. Mom, I don't know what you think we did. But it wasn't malicious. Please call me. Emma misses you. I stared at that last line for a long time. Emma hadn't called. Hadn't written. Hadn't asked. Children don't miss what they don't see. I put the note in the drawer with the rest. By the end of the week, the calls stopped. Not entirely. But the urgency drained away. They were regrouping, I knew. Reframing the story. In their version, I was unstable. Forgetful. Bitter. Overreacting. It was easier for them to believe that than to accept what they'd done. But it didn't matter. Because the story no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me now. For the first time in decades, the silence in my house didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. In the weeks that followed, the world didn't end. No dramatic confrontations. No tearful doorstep apologies. Just a slow unraveling of ties that had always been more fragile than I allowed myself to believe. I went about my days with a new rhythm. Simpler. Quieter. I opened the windows each morning. Let the breeze carry the scent of damp earth into the corners of the house that hadn't known fresh air in years. I sorted through old drawers. Shredded papers I'd once thought I might need. Burned candles down to their wick ends just because I could. I didn't speak their names aloud. And they, for their part, didn't speak mine. Once, I saw Michael's name flash across my caller ID. I let it ring. He didn't leave a message. That was the last time he tried. Rachel waited longer. She held on, I think, to the illusion that she could wait me out. That I would soften. That the mother she remembered, the one who rescued science projects at the last minute, who wrote checks when the rent was late, who stayed quiet through insult after insult, would reappear. But I was no longer that mother. I had learned something dangerous. I had learned to stop reaching. The lawyer sent over the new will. I read it slowly, pencil in hand, underlining the names I'd chosen with care. People who had been kind in small ways. The neighbor who brought over soup when I broke my wrist. The librarian who always remembered my birthday. Emma's third-grade teacher, who once stayed after class just to help her tie her shoes. None of them were family by blood. But they had seen me. I made one last change to the document before signing, a letter. Handwritten. Tucked into the file with the heading, to be opened only after my passing. In it, I wrote the truth, not out of vengeance, but so there would be no confusion. To my children, it began. If you're reading this, then I am gone, and the silence between us has outlived me. I want you to understand something. What you did wasn't just financial. It wasn't just about a vacation or a credit card. It was about erasure. You built memories with my money, while removing me from the picture entirely. You decided I was useful, but not worthy. Necessary, but not welcome. You believed I would not notice. Or worse, that I would notice, and stay quiet. But I did notice. And I did not stay quiet. This home, this money, this life, none of it was a gift to you. I worked for it. I endured. I chose love over comfort, again and again, believing one day it would be returned. It was not. So now, I choose something else, clarity. I wish you peace. I wish you growth. But I no longer wish to be part of a story that does not include me unless I am paying for the ink. I signed it with my full name. The name I had before I was a wife. Before I was a mother. Margaret Louise Bennett. That evening, I poured myself a small glass of sherry, one Harold had hidden in the back of the cabinet, saved for a real occasion, he used to say. I decided this counted. I toasted the birds outside. The stillness. My own stubborn heart. I didn't cry. But I did feel something open inside me. A slow bloom. A reclamation. I wasn't done yet. It's been 6 months now. The pie tins are still in the cupboard. The bird feeder stays full. And the silence, once sharp and echoing, has settled into something softer. Like the hush of fresh snow. I still don't hear from them. Emma sent a drawing last week, a house with 3 windows, 1 tree, and a small figure sitting alone in the yard. No name. No note. But I knew it was me. I keep it on the mantel. There's a part of me that still aches, sometimes. When the holidays come. When the mailbox is empty. When a neighbor mentions her daughter dropping by, just because. But the ache doesn't own me anymore. It just reminds me I once loved deeply. That I gave what I had. And that I stopped before it broke me. I've started doing small things I never used to. Morning walks before the dew dries. Library outings without purpose. I joined a knitting circle, not because I need the scarves, but because I like the sound of women breathing beside me, the low hum of their stories. I even booked a short trip for myself, nothing fancy. A cabin, a lake, a week with books and silence and the kind of sleep that comes when no one needs you for anything. I don't call it starting over. It's not that neat. It's just, mine now. My life. My quiet. My name. They spent my money on oceans and linen and fine meals. They left me with silence. And I turned it into peace. I still keep 1 slice of that apple pie in the freezer. Not because I'm waiting for them. But because I promised myself I'd never give everything away again. Not even dessert.